Visit geico.com for a free rate quote. Well, as we get ready for the weekend, here's where we are. Going to give you some optimism right off the top of the show. And I hope wherever you are across this great country or this great land, you guys are having a good Friday. So let me go ahead and say this. We know, barring craziness, everything is moving in a good direction in the world of pro sports. MLS has already started. I know they've had a couple of teams that have had to back out, but MLS is already underway. We've got Major League Baseball teams beginning spring training part 2, and that seems to be going at least decently. The NBA players and teams and coaches are all arriving in Orlando. They will be ready to go soon. The NHL has put in place a plan to return in Canada on August the 1st, and the NFL, barring craziness, seems set to play and begin the process of putting their season together sometime in August as well. So there were a lot of people out there when we had the Rudy Gobert test positive incident, and suddenly the NBA stopped, and then very rapidly in short order, everything else shut down as well back in March. There were a lot of people out there that immediately believed, okay, we're done with athletics for maybe the rest of 2020. And those people were very active on social media. Many of them were active in the media in general. They went ahead and said, sports are done. Well, those people have been wrong for the 5 major pro sports. And we're now underway, and frankly, I think this probably got not enough attention with the MLS being back rolling with everything associated with that return. And so we are now sitting in an interesting spot where all of the major breaking news is focused on college football. Because really, every other sport that is planned to be going on by the fall has pretty much let you know, hey, we're going to be back. And the people who are opposed to the return of sports, they can't come out and they can't attack the NFL, the NBA, Major League Baseball, the NHL, or MLS because they've lost those battles. And one reason I think they've lost those battles is because all of those sports have a commissioner, whether the commissioner did a good or bad job, that have all been focused on ensuring that they're back and they're running. One commissioner, right? Roger Goodell managed to run the NFL and get everything fine with the NFL draft and also with NFL free agency. And so far, his mandate has been pretty clear. Our intention is to play. Now, the preseason might not end up happening. We understand that. In the grand scheme of things, most fans don't care at all. We know that a couple of the preseason games are canceled. The first and the fourth, maybe the second and the third end up being officially canceled too. That remains to be seen. But so far, Roger Goodell has managed the coronavirus about as well as he could have, in my opinion. Also, we know that Adam Silver has put in place a pretty aggressive plan for the NBA to come back. The whole bubble idea in general appears like it can be a success because all you have to do is look over the Atlantic at what has happened with professional soccer leagues, with the Bundesliga, with La Liga, with the English Premier League, and also with Serie A in Italy, in England, in Germany, and in all of those countries. We have seen, Spain as well, an ability to come back and get rolling. And they've done it without major infection growing. So Adam Silver, I've got a ton of issues if you listen to this show with the way that the NBA has turned into a fake, in my opinion, social justice warrior league when they really need to be willing to have the same message to China as they have in the United States, and they haven't been willing to do that. But he's managed, Adam Silver has, to get the league back, all right? NFL, NBA, Don Garber, who's been with the MLS forever. They've had a couple of teams have to drop out of the MLS Cup, but they are back and running as well. And again, I think if anything, we've probably given a little bit less attention to the return of the MLS as we deserve, primarily because most of you, including me, aren't really big MLS fans. Not only has hockey found a way to get back, but they have found a way to get back in the middle of having to negotiate also a CBA extension and they're doing it internationally. They're coming back to play in Canada. And then Major League Baseball, look, Rob Manfred has been a total mess in terms of the negotiations, but in terms of the sport actually coming back, they're going to play a 60-game season. It seems it would be a big surprise if those aren't ongoing. So all of the you can't play attention has shifted from all of those pro sports leagues, which are going to play. Now, maybe they won't finish. Maybe they'll have to stop early. Maybe there's going to be chaos. I think it's fair to say predicting how anything in 2020 is going to go has so far been a total fool's errand. So I'm not going to pretend to know exactly how everything is going to go from here. But the data all points in the direction of those pro sports leagues happening, partly because they have commissioners. There is no overall commissioner of college football. And so yesterday, when the major domino fell of the Big Ten announcing that they were not going to play out-of-conference games, there were a lot of rapid reactions where people were surprised, including, by the way, the Big Ten commissioner saying, hey, it's possible that we're not going to actually have a season at all. And one of the challenges from college football is the 5 major conference commissioners do not all speak as one because there is no overarching commissioner to lead the charge here. Certainly, it's also different dealing with professional sports leagues and adults who can choose whether or not to play as it is in college. But I'm going to explain here in a minute why I don't think that distinction is as significant as some may lead you to believe. So what have we lost by the Big Ten making the decision to not play out of conference games? Well, there are a bunch of games that stand out that we have ended up losing. We've lost Michigan's game against Washington, Ohio State's game against Oregon, Michigan State's game against Miami, Wisconsin against Notre Dame right now at Lambeau Field. And you've got a ton of different smaller schools who basically have, by the way, we've also lost Penn State, Virginia Tech, theoretically also Iowa State. And in the process, you also have a ton of smaller schools that rely on their budgets being met by being able to play these out-of-conference games. And this is a big part of the non-conference being canceled by the Big Ten. It is more so than anything else. And by the way, the Big Ten is saying they're going to play 10 games in conference inside of their sport, which is up from the usual 9-game conference slate. And so there's lots of uncertainty about what's going to happen with a lot of the other conferences, and that's going to remain to be seen. There's an expectation that maybe the ACC and the Pac-12 will officially make statements and follow the lead of the Big Ten. There's also a possibility that that might not happen. The SEC and the Big 12 seem so far focused on the idea that they're going to try to play the out-of-conference games. But it's important to remember here, we're talking in a big way about these smaller schools in the non-conference slate that are losing their ability to make budget by not having these games to play. And a part of me wonders, on the financial side, whether this is one way for the conferences to save money, because that way they don't have to pay for these teams to come travel and play against them. Just at least worth thinking about. I don't know what those contracts all say, but if you happen to be in the MAC, for instance, which plays a lot of games against teams in the Big Ten, are the Big Ten schools able to void these contracts because the contracts were predicated on having 70, 80, 100,000 people in the stadium, and now you're recognizing that you're not going to be able to do that potentially, and that's turning into a big issue as well. But the biggest part is I don't really buy the logic. I don't buy the logic, really, that by playing only games in your conference, you are actually in any way protecting your student athletes. And the reason why I don't really buy that logic is because it doesn't make sense. Just because you're a school in the MAC or you're a smaller school doesn't mean that you don't have a healthy way to keep your team from being infected. I understand it might not necessarily be a standardized process, but I don't really buy the idea of that mattering. Now, I somewhat understand the idea of, hey, we don't want to travel all the way across the country. We don't necessarily want Michigan to go to Washington, and we don't necessarily want Ohio State to go to Oregon. We'd rather be in a situation where maybe instead of having to get on a plane, most of the time, for a lot of these games, we can bus theoretically or take short flights. But again, the travel for college football is relatively minimal. This would make more sense to me in a college basketball situation where you've got a lot more travel and a lot more games. But theoretically, you only have to be on the road in the first place for 4 or 5 weeks out of the season. And you're usually only on the road, for most teams only travel for one night. So you would leave on, let's say, a Friday morning, you would stay in a hotel Friday night, and then you would fly back out Saturday as soon as you're done with the game. And many of these teams in major conferences are flying on charter airplanes, so it's not like they're going through your standard airport security system or having to worry about where a plane might have been or anything else. The MAC commissioner came out and said basically that their decision, the Big Ten's decision, was earlier than anticipated. We were anxious to pursue a full season. This is according to SI, if at all possible. The non-conference and conference games are important to us, and that's because for many of these schools, the budget is predicated on being able to play the non-conference games. So without that ability, this becomes a major, major issue. Now, some people out there are saying, well, why don't we just move the games to the spring? And my answer on that is pretty straightforward. There are 3 pretty clear reasons why moving to the spring doesn't make a lot of sense. And Urban Meyer basically said, hey, there's no way that a spring college football season is going to happen. So I think basically the idea is fall football for college or bust. And I'll give you 3 big reasons why that's the case. First of all, if you play in the spring, I don't buy that if you're concerned about health-related reasons, there are likely to be more issues in cold weather than there are in warm weather, because typically viruses spread much more in the cold weather, in cold and flu season. That's why we call it that, in January, February, and March, than they would be in September, October, November, where it's still warm for many parts of the country. And by the way, one of the issues with the virus spreading right now in warm weather venues seems to be predicated on people spending more time inside. In other words, the virus clearly spreads better indoors, and it seems to spread more when you're indoors trying to avoid the heat outside than it does spreading outdoors in general. But the basic takeaway here is in January, February, March, and April, it's more likely that there's a virus circulating in that time of year than otherwise. Also, all the best players are not going to play in the spring. If you are Trevor Lawrence or if you are Justin Fields or any of the other top players that are out there, you will not play in the spring because it makes no sense. That's when you get ready for the NFL Combine. You will have tens of millions of dollars at stake and virtually nothing to gain. All of the top juniors who would go pro and all of the seniors who hope to have a pro football career, none of those guys are going to play. So you're talking about only having freshmen, sophomores, and juniors who are not good enough to consider going pro to be playing. And finally, and this was Urban Meyer's big point about this in a larger context, you're playing 2 seasons really rapidly. You're talking about not finishing college football until April and then turning around again and basically playing a few months later a second season in the fall. That's too much stress to put on all of these young guys' bodies. It's just not safe, irrespective of the virus, to play February, March, April, take off May and June, and then you're right back into camp in July, and then you play a whole football season in the fall. That's too many football games in too short of a period of time. So spring football is not an option. It might be an option, kind of like you have now with the spring game. There might be a couple of exhibitions that could be played, but I really don't believe this idea of, oh, if we just push the season back farther, it's going to make more sense. I've been telling you guys on this program for a while, I think it's more likely to make sense, honestly, to go ahead and push it up closer, like play sooner. They can't do that because they got to get guys ready, but September and October is when you would want to be playing college football games. I don't think there's any doubt at all about this. Now, there's a lot going on associated with college football, but I also think it's important for you to realize that a big part of this is everybody suddenly focusing all on the same league, right? Because all of the pro sports leagues are ready to go, and now everybody who is focused on will they or won't they is turn their attention to college football. And they're putting a lot of pressure on the presidents, on the commissioners, on the athletic directors. There is a lot of pressure being brought to bear because there's no other target right now. We know that we're going to have pro sports, and I really don't buy into the idea that suddenly these kids are going to be at a lot more danger by playing football. I really don't, because the data reflects that these kids are much safer on college campuses than they might well be at home, because there's better doctors and better medical treatment there. But also the bigger issue remains, your average college-age kid is more likely to be struck by lightning than they are to die of the coronavirus. Your average college kid is much more likely to die of the flu than they are of the coronavirus. And so if you look at this, this is why I'm fired up that where I live in Nashville, they suddenly have decided not to allow kids to come back to school for the first month of the school season. Now, we start early in the Nashville area, August 4th, and my kids don't live, we don't live right in downtown Nashville, so this doesn't necessarily impact us already. But kids, young kids, are 20 times as likely to die of the flu as they are the coronavirus. And so this just in and of itself doesn't make a lot of sense when I look at all the data here. We need to have these kids back on a college campus and back playing football. I don't think the danger to them is any more substantial on a college campus than it would be living wherever they are in their hometowns or home cities. All right. You, by the way, have had a tremendous run. I appreciate all of you signing up for the OutKick VIP. If you love OutKick and you want to continue to support us, you love Jason Whitlock, you love me, go sign up for the OutKick VIP right now. You get a VIP phone line. You get the ability to call directly in when we take phone calls. You get a VIP message board. You get the ability to comment on all the posts that we have at OutKick. And right now, for a limited time, you get an autographed copy of my book. All of that. Go to OutKick right now and sign up for the VIP. I am Clay Travis. This is OutKick the Coverage. Hope all of you are doing well. This is Fox Sports Radio.